So Robert, you just need to unmute yourself and then you should be good to go.
Okay, we're ready to go?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much.
Okay, here we go. Can everybody see that? Is that okay? So far, so good?
Yeah.
I should just warn you folks, I've had a few technical problems today with PowerPoint. It doesn't seem to always fire up the clips that I've got for you, so there might be a little bit of faffing around, for which I apologise in advance. But thanks all for coming along. So I'm going to do a little talk about my podcast project called Something to Do with Art. And so for those who don't know me, my name is Brooke Good and I'm an artist based in Cambridge, and I'm interested in words and text and language and trying to get to the bottom of things, and that includes getting to the bottom of art and creativity. I've done a number of projects in this area, one of them being my little dictionary, which is in the bottom left hand corner there, in which I explore definitions of art. So the podcast as a project seems to me to be a little bit of a continuation from my inquiries into the possibilities for art. So it's launched on SoundCloud. So the reason for the talk is that a couple of days ago, I launched another 7 episodes to follow the 4 which I had put out earlier in the year. And the name of the game with the podcast was really to invite artists to have a chat and go around and be nosy, as it were, and see them in their studios and find out what they do and how they're creative and what they do. So it's not so much about trying to ask them about an upcoming show or a forthcoming event or the specifics of their own particular inquiries, but more the generalities about why they make art at all rather than doing something else. And the name of the podcast comes from one of my all-time heroes, John Baldessari, and this is called The Pencil Project, The Pencil Story, that is one of his works. And it says, "I had this old pencil on the dashboard of my car for a long time. Every time I saw it, I felt uncomfortable, since its point was so dull and dirty. I always intended to sharpen it, and finally couldn't bear it any longer, and did sharpen it. I'm not sure, but I think that this has something to do with art." So it's that kind of slight sense of what is art, what's its possibilities. I'm not quite sure, but I think that seems like something to do with it. So that seemed like a good place for me to begin my own inquiries. So as I say, I've got 7 fresh new episodes that I've launched, and I wanted to introduce them a little bit. And I thought I'd say a little bit about each of the participants, including the 4 who were in the original one. So this is Barbara Zanderton, and she was my very first, I was going to say victim, my very first interviewee, podcastee. And you can just see behind her on the table is the little microphone that I use. So I can say a little bit about the technicalities if anybody's interested. So Barbara is interested in concrete, and this is the South Bank, and this little door here, this little hobbit hole, is her favourite door in the whole of the South Bank, and she documents concrete and the building of concrete structures. So I had a conversation with Barbara about what she does and why she's so interested in concrete, because that's not something that as far as I could see, is something that's necessarily going to be terribly creative. I'm going to play you just a little clip of the very opening sequence, just to give you a flavour of what the podcast sounds like. Oh no, I'm not. The links are no longer working. Oh lordy. Okay, could be one of those evenings. Let's try it from here. Hang on a second. Oh, I can see this is going to be one of those days, I'm afraid. Bear with me a second. Hopefully that is going to play. Okay. Right. Hello, Barbara.
Hello, Robert. Does anyone ever call you Bob? Why did you even say that?
Well, funny enough, that was going to be my first question. I was going to say, welcome to my podcast. And
Thank you.
yeah, and I was going to say, before we go much further, is it okay if I call you Barbara?
Yes, you may call me Barbara.
Because I know that your stage name, so to speak, is B.A. Zanderton. So
Yes.
maybe I should refer to you as B.A., good morning, B.A.
No, Barbara.
So why do you choose B.A. Zanderton for your stage presence, as it were, your artistic name, would you say?
I don't like the name Barbara particularly, and I like my initials.
Oh, right.
I like my surname quite a lot.
Uh-huh.
So I just prefer that.
What Zanderton? What is it about Zanderton that does it for
Well,
you?
it's an unusual name,
Uh-huh.
and it's an interesting name.
It is. It is. Has a certain zip to it.
Yeah.
A little bit of a ring.
Yeah.
Don't know about good. I'm not sure whether good is a good name to be having, but maybe it comes burdened with lots of freight. So this is my first podcast anyway. So you're my first guinea pig, we were saying, wasn't it?
Yes.
What do you think about my idea for doing a podcast? Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it's really interesting because you're not going to be interviewing super famous people probably, and so you're going to be,
maybe
you might, but you have a wide range of people, and some people who, like me, don't have a presence particularly but work at their art, and so it's about engaging with making.
Yeah,
I
think so. I'm intrigued to find out what makes artists tick and to get a flavour of not only what they're doing but why they're doing it and the energy around it and why they're doing it. But do you think there are any questions particularly that I should be asking you? Maybe that's something you can be thinking about.
No, because I think the questions I would think you should ask me would probably be boring. You bear in mind they came to this late in life. So although I'm 75, I'm like somebody who's 30.
Right.
In terms of how long I've been doing this.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wow. Does that kind of, how does that influence what you do, or does it?
So this is what I think is interesting. I have a pension,
mm-hmm.
and I don't need to work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not well off, but I don't need to work. And my young friends who I was at art college with need to make a living. Some of them are figuring out how to stay in the world of art, and some of them aren't. So I have the luxury of being able to play around and make work. I don't feel a necessity to sell anything or do something that is I don't need to exhibit particularly, but I think that's a double-edged sword because it also means that you can be very self-indulgent and not particularly ambitious for yourself. And I think about that. I think about that more recently.
Are you ambitious for yourself, do you think?
No, I don't think so. And I've been thinking about that a lot because there's a lot of stuff about it.
Okay, so I wanted to play you that clip because it started off and it kind of gave you a sense of the introduction to it, but also how I found that people quite quickly were quite willing to share quite detailed stories and insights into themselves. And shortly after that, Barbara tells me how, her desire to make art goes all the way back to when she was 15 and she felt that she was a little bit overlooked and that she didn't feel that she had a voice. And I was surprised during these podcasts and these conversations how quickly people were willing to share the motivations and the kind of deep-seated reasons for doing their work. And I didn't want to share particular clips of the funniest bits or the highlights in that respect because that's taking them out of context. But suffice to say that the Barbara episode, several people have told me that there's a section in there that they find really entertaining. She's a very entertaining character, and when she talks about how she collects hubcaps as well, it's a really it was very interesting. I found it a very entertaining conversation to be having. So what I thought I would do tonight was briefly introduce each of my podcastees in turn. And the way to do that, I thought that I would link the two together. So what links Barbara and Ahmed, and what links Ahmed to Alban, and Alban to Ellie, and Ellie to Liz, and so on. So I'm going to quickly whiz through them all to give you a little bit of a flavour of each of them. So what links Barbara to Ahmed? So Ahmed is sitting down here at the front of the steps to his house, and that's number 36 you can see there. And Ahmed turned his house into an art space. He's called it Space 36, and he throws it open to artists, and these are the artists that he did for a recent exhibition. And I know that some people do open studios, but this is serious, turning your house into an art space. So he invited artists to spend time over a 4-month period, and pretty well anything that they want to do, he will let them do. And if he doesn't think they're being ambitious enough, he says, come on, you can do more than that. And he'll completely turn the insides of his house into little gallery spaces for his artists. And he talks to me about how he had an artist who wanted to do some interviews, and then set up this little recording space in the middle of his house, and completely turns it over to that. So I found that a very refreshing approach to his art and his creativity. He's also the only artist in the show, in the series, that talks about COVID and the virus, because I didn't want the conversations to be hijacked, as it were, by talks about the impact of the virus. I wanted to concentrate on the art and the creativity. But Ahmed was doing a show about responses to the virus, so we talked about that as part of that one. Okay, so what links Barbara to Ahmed? Well, they both came to art relatively late in life, and they both talk about how kind of liberating that is to them, because they came to it late on. They feel free from the baggage of expectation, and the baggage of career, and the baggage of the art hamster wheel, as it were. And that I found quite a refreshing way of thinking about art, and why you make art. Okay, so what links Ahmed to Alban? Alban is my next artist, and Alban is an illustrator, and he does a lot of graphic design, and he also does performative works where he'll do these great big monotone drawings in real time whilst there's a jazz group playing alongside. So he does a lot of performative drawing, and he creates a lot of very graphic work, and he works full-time as an illustrator and does album covers and so on. The reason also that I was interested in Alban was that his approach to art is very inclusive, and he does a lot of exhibitions where everybody who enters is accepted. So he doesn't have a selection process, as it were. It's a very inclusive, a very generous approach to his art. And he does a lot of exhibitions around mental health and the art of caring. So I had a long conversation with him about that. And also in this one, something to highlight, something that I found it a little bit gory, I must confess, but he talks about how he did some drawing in the dissecting room at Guy's Hospital. So that's not one for the faint-hearted, but so that was Alban. And what links Ahmed to Alban? Well, they both want to have art in alternative spaces away from the gallery. So Ahmed wants to have art in his own house, and Alban wants to have art out on the street. Or he says at one point in the interview, he said, I'd like 90% of art to be outside the gallery. So he wants that inclusive, kind of democratic, approachable art, rather than art in a sacred space, a white cube. Although, funnily enough, he has actually exhibited his work at Tate Modern, so there's a little bit of a discrepancy there, potentially. Okay, so next up is Ellie Breeze, and what links Alban to Ellie? So this is Ellie, and this was our little image for our podcast chat, and I wanted to direct you to the lovely picture that is horizontally behind us of two people, and I think it's a wedding scene. And Ellie does a lot of painting, and it's a lot of a painting of scenes that are taken from photographs from family albums. and we talked about this picture quite a lot, and there's a nice story around that. So Ellie was telling me a lot about her painting. Whoops. And Ellie was also telling me about being selected for New Contemporaries, and this is Ellie's work. I really love the style that she brings to it, and the very kind of, there's a gentle humour, but also I think a little bit of a fragility to the people, and a poignancy to all of them. But the conversation was also interesting in terms of the ideas about leaving art school and trying to make your way in the big bad art world. So what links Alban to Ellie? Well, they're two people who work in 2D. A lot of artists these days work three-dimensionally. Not so many people who paint and draw as their primary mode of expression. So that's a little connection between the two. Oh dear. Sorry, folks. The system seems to have hung again. Hang on. See, it could be a long evening.
You okay, Robert?
Yeah, well, yeah, sorry folks, I just have to apologize because this is just driving me nuts. I don't know why it's doing it, but normally I know how to fix it, and of course this time it ain't doing that, so I'm just slightly struggling here. Oh, okay, here we go. Okay, we're back in business. So do you need to share the screen for me then, Susie, or can you all see it?
You should be able to share it again.
Okay.
I can. You should share screen.
Okay, right.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, apologies for that. I've no idea why that is doing it. Okay, so they both work in 2D. So what connects Ellie to Liz? Well, the other thing that Ellie has been doing since leaving art school, setting up a project called Motion Sickness in a disused shop as a way to make connections and to make things happen in Cambridge, but also as a way to stay connected after art school. That's also what Liz Brady has done with her project called Broken Grey Wires, a collective that she set up in order to promote mental health and to work with others who are also interested in the same neck of the woods. And that's a strategy that a lot of artists use, but I think it is a really good way of staying connected in the art world. So my conversations with Liz were very interesting, also because Liz curates some shows with some really great artists in them, and some of them are very well known: Martin Creed, Vito Acconci, Tim Etchells, Gillian Waring, Bill Viola, Pipolotti Rist. So it was very interesting to catch up with her about the shows that she puts together. There is a little link to some audio there, but maybe I'll play it to you at the end because I'm not sure that it's going to work given how we're getting on this evening. So, okay, so that's Liz Brady. What connects Liz to me? A love of football. We're not too many artists that I know are interested in football, but Liz is a passionate, fanatical Everton fan, more so than I am a Spurs fan. And I couldn't get my head round because Liz is, works with mental health, issues of mental health, and she talks very candidly about her own mental health. And for me, the disappointment of Spurs losing is just too much. I can't invest that much into something that is beyond my own control, whereas Liz seems to be kind of up and down with the moods of Everton, which so anyway, we have a conversation about that and the relationship with that to mental health, but there we go. So what links me to Jane Good? And it's not my surname. Well, it is my surname. Jane Good. Not many people have got the surname Good that I come across. But Jane, she's no relation as far as we're aware. But Jane is a certified Bob Ross accredited instructor. And for those of you who may not know, Bob Ross is or was a cult figure in the world of TV demonstrations of art, and he's become something of a phenomenon just recently. During lockdown, a lot of people are turning to listen to the repeats of his episodes because they are just so reassuring and chilled. And it says right at the bottom of here, sure, you might find some of these soothing, but none of them compares to watching and listening to Bob Ross paint. So I was intrigued when I came across the fact that there are Bob Ross instructors. I wanted to meet one, and there's Bob. There's a cardboard cutout of Bob Ross in Jane's studio. So Jane teaches people to paint, and it's very an introductory level type of painting, and it's a very particular style. And we have a long conversation about what sort of creativity this involves and whether or not this could be considered to be kitsch. And Jane was a very good sport and a very interesting person to talk to. And she says that Bob Ross changed her life. So she's absolutely adamant about the impact that art can have, and that art did have on her life. Okay, so Tom Hackett is next up, and Tom does performative walks, often in very brightly coloured suits around city centres to have conversations with people. And sometimes he does them wheeling a wheelbarrow. It all started apparently when he was asked to dog sit for somebody, and he had to take this dog out for a walk, and he found that people suddenly started to have conversations with him because he had a dog, and that became a catalyst for conversation. So he thought to himself, well, maybe if I have a dog, a silicon dog, I can walk around with that and people will stop me and have conversations as well. And so that's how some of his performances began. And he becomes something of a confessor figure. He finds that people are stopping him in the street and asking him all sorts of questions about what he's doing and why. And it's a very cathartic experience. So I had a long conversation with Tom about what he does and why he does it. The link to Jane and Tom is that they both changed careers. Jane told me how she was a civil servant before. By total chance, she was given a Bob Ross painting course and went on it, and chucked in her job as a result. And Tom tells me a lovely story about how he was working in local government at about age 20, and his boss called him into the office one day and said to him kind of, son, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, son, take a look around you. If you work hard, all this could be yours. And he had a look around and he thought, oh my Lord, I've got to do something. I've got to get out of here. So that was his wake up call to exit the world of local government and make his way as an artist. Okay, so what links Tom Hackett to Beric Livingston? Beric is very happy to have him joining me tonight here. He might have to slope off, which is fine, but I'm very delighted that he is here with us today. So Beric is an actor and a composer, a musician, and composed the jingle for our for the podcast, my lovely jingle. So which I'm absolutely delighted with. And so Beric, there was Beric, and we were talking about, I wanted to find out from Beric whether the musical creative process is the same as the artistic, the visual one, because I've got a totally tin ear when it comes to music. I'm grade 1 piano, and I just wondered how you go about creating musical tunes and compose things. Okay, so we talked about that, but Beric, I hope you don't mind if I share this with you. So Beric also told me that he was a as part of his portfolio career, he was a quiz show host for a while, and I was just looking at, I was trying to find a picture for this, and I look there on Reddit, there's the Beric Livingstone appreciation thread. And so I don't want to embarrass Beric, but we did talk about this. What was interesting about this was that this came up unexpectedly for Beric and was a little bit of a sideline to what he was hoping to do. He wanted to be, tells me about being a frontman for a band. And ended up being a quiz show host, a very good quiz show host by all accounts. There is a God and his name is Beric. So there we go, Beric. Beric was telling me about being stopped in the street and tells a story about being recognised and how becoming a little bit well known, and Beric is very modest about it, but how it has these unexpected side effects to it. So that was a little avenue in our conversation that I wasn't expecting to take, but was a very interesting digression. So the link between Tom and Beric is they both get stopped in the street. The link between Beric and Craig is they're the only two who are not, I suppose, experimental artists or artists per se, and Craig is an actor. And I wanted to catch up with Craig. He was doing a performance at the time of Bristol Old Vic of Romantics Anonymous, and this was on the set there. And he showed me around and told me all about it. And I was curious to compare his version or his view of the theatre and performance from a theatrical point of view and from an entertainment point of view, as opposed to a lot of experimental art, which performance is not necessarily driven directly by ideas of entertainment. So I thought that was quite an interesting contrast. And that's the link between Craig and Carl, because Carl talks about theatricality and says in no uncertain terms that he doesn't like the theatre. He does performance work, but for him, the theatre is not the right or not suitable as a mode of expression. It's not that he doesn't see the benefits, as it were, of the theatre, but for him, the theatricality is a problem. So that's an interesting compare and contrast between the two. And this is Carl doing one of his performances. This is another of Carl's pieces of work where he does a carnival, and he tells an amusing story of what happens when that all goes horribly wrong, which was quite entertaining. Okay, so what links Carl to Gemma? Well, in the nicest possible way, kind of manure. Carl uses a lot of manure in his work. He uses fresh horse manure or cow dung to make his wattle and daub performative props. And Gemma, by her own admission, tends to talk a little bit of manure, talks a little bit of alternative realities, shall we say, in her work. A lot of her work is based around fictions, and she would say it's bullshit, some of the stuff that she does, and it's deliberately exploring the links between truth and falsehood, and that's something that she explores in her work. And this was a very bizarre conversation that I had with her, because I don't want to kind of give away what happens, but all I would say is that it's a bit like Derren Brown. I felt at the end of it, I came out of it thinking, what has just happened? Gemma is interested, I say, in truth and falsity, and she twists me around her little finger. Let's just put it that way, but you'll have to take a listen to that one. She also is interested in the situation in America. She's got a residency at Las Vegas, and so she's been going over there to do some work over there. And as part of that, she has been setting up this helpline where she can take calls from people, and she will provide them with answers to their problems. So that was an interesting conversation that I had with Gemma. Oh, I'm sorry, folks. It's clearly this is going to be one of those days. We're nearly at the end. Don't worry. The good news is we're nearly at the end. Okay, let's see if we can just get to the last few slides without any further problems. There we go. So finally, the link between Gemma and Barbara, taking us full circle, is Las Vegas. Gemma has a lot of links to Las Vegas, and we talk about Las Vegas, and the link with Barbara is that there's a Cement Association annual conference that takes place in Las Vegas. So there you go. Okay, so I just wanted to give you that little introduction to them all, and really to say that it's not so much talking about the specifics of their work, as I say, but really what makes people tick and why people do the art that they do and what motivates them. And I suppose my kind of concluding thought is that because, you know, in the current situation and with the world as it is, it all seems as though things are going a little bit pear-shaped, to put it mildly. And we look to kind of politicians and to scientists to try and fix things for us, and kind of what does art bring to the party? And I think the conclusion that comes loud and clear from everybody that I've talked to is that sense of energy and buzz that creativity does. And, you know, it's essential that we have these outlets and these opportunities to explore these different subjects in these alternative ways to keep people grounded, as it were, and keep people having an outlet for ideas and modes of expression and engaging with each other and conversations. And that's what I think art is doing. But I don't want to draw too many conclusions. I kind of resist drawing any conclusions in the podcast themselves. I hope they're kind of open-ended conversations rather than things in which I'm trying to get to a particular end point. Okay, so what happens next? Very briefly, I'm doing a little blog about the podcast over at Artist Newsletter, and I'm going to have a little review that's been written by Yasmin Ricks, which is going to be going live there tomorrow. And I've got a little bonus episode as well. This is Bill Furlong, who I had a conversation with a little while ago, and I'm just editing down. He did the original audio arts project back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, all the way through to 2000. And he interviewed hundreds and hundreds of artists from the time, some very big names, you know, all through the YBA generation and beyond, about what they did, and built up this enormous archive of hundreds of conversations on the old tape cassettes. And that's all been archived at Tape Britain. So I had a conversation with him a little while ago to try and give me some hints and tips as to what he did and why he did it and what he might suggest for me. So I'm going to edit that down, and that will form a little bonus episode. Okay, but I think that is probably about it for now. I did have a couple of excerpts from Liz and Gemma, but maybe we'll take some questions, and if people would like to, then I can play them as we see fit. But let's leave it at that for now, and thank you very much. And if anybody's got any questions, and indeed from Ellie, and I don't know if Beric is still able to be with us, but maybe whether anybody would like to offer any comments about the podcast. I'll be very happy to hear what people have got to say about it. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Robert. I'm just going to swap to gallery view. Everyone should be able to unmute themselves now. And have we got any questions?
Rosemary, hello.
Oh, Rosemary, one sec. You should be able to unmute yourself. Just click on the screen. It should ask you to unmute.
Should be all right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm just going to make a comment and say, I watched Carl Gent's one this afternoon, actually. I've been a bit lax in watching these. I've only seen two at the moment. But anyway, I really enjoyed Carl's one this afternoon. And no, it took me back to a sort of light bulb moment. I remember way back, probably, I don't know, late 60s, early 70s, when I went to the Whitechapel and I saw my first example of process art, and I suddenly saw what possibilities there were in process as opposed to a static object, and I found it really quite thought-provoking, the whole thing. So I just appreciating that one.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, that one's an interesting one because Carl is, as you say, he's very interested in the process almost more than the outcome. He says, whereas when I do my art, if the end result isn't exactly as I want it to be, I feel very stressed. Whereas he's very open. Oh, it's about the process, and he talks about, you know, the steps that he goes through, doesn't he? And that's really what interests him as much as the end result. And then if there's a little bit of happy accident in it, that's all the better. So I'm glad. Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed that one. Yeah, that is a favourite of mine, I must admit. Yeah, I did enjoy that one. Any more? Would Ellie or Beric want to say anything about what it's like to be on the other end? Because I'm always amazed that anybody actually says yes and agrees to take part, because I feel like I'm being very intrusive by inviting myself round and asking you what you do. Oh, you need to unmute.
Unmute myself. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
I mean, I just loved being a part of this. I loved doing the music for it, and I loved the interview with you because you have this incredibly disarming style, which I think hides this sort of incredibly accomplished results that you get. And I've loved listening to the podcast, partly to see the commonality. And it's interesting that you used links between people as your kind of way through this today, because the podcasts have really shown some of that commonality between people working in quite different media. And as someone that quite often works in a sort of a silo alone, it's been really inspiring to hear what other people are doing, and it definitely has generated a lot of positivity and a lot of kind of must try harder kind of feelings for me. And I think as an actor, as one part of my random shuffle career, you don't always get to choose what sort of projects you do or how they play out. There's a lot that's decided for you. So hearing people working in visual art speaking about doing what interests them is a kind of a lovely reminder of, oh yeah, we have a little bit more agency than we think, which has also been lovely. So thanks for including me in it. It's been a joy.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, that reminds me that there are always so many. I go away from them all thinking, oh, there are so many questions that I wish I had asked, or I forgot to ask, or follow-ups that I didn't take. And one of them is because I think about acting is, how on earth can you accept a part when you don't necessarily agree with the character that you're playing? You know, there's that sense of choice there to some extent, whereas with, as you say, with an artist, there's that intentionality, and you've only got yourself to blame to some extent with what you end up doing, whereas part of what you're given as an actor is already literally scripted for you. So anyway, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. And yeah, there were definitely commonalities, like when you were saying about starting things but not always finishing them. That is so common, you know, and you have to kind of start things and leave them to kind of simmer in the background, and then hope that they come to the boil later on, maybe. I don't know. What did you, Ellie? Did you have any? I don't feel you've got to say anything. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm curious if you had any feedback or thoughts.
Got it.
All right.
I was just going to say, yeah, no, I didn't have a problem saying yes, because I remember we've had conversations before, and I always find that talking through what I'm doing, or having someone ask, I don't know whether it's like being in therapy or something, you know, when people ask you questions and you're like, oh, I've never like asked myself that, but now I'm thinking about it, and you sort of like unlock new things about your work, and you like see it in a different way. So I've always found that really useful. And it was the same again with this podcast, that it kind of made me look at things from a different angle and made me consider new things. So I always find it really useful from like a selfish point of view to have those conversations. Yeah.
Well, I do too. I mean, that's really why I do it, because I want to learn from everybody else as well. And I've learned from everybody, and everybody I've always come away with something thinking, well, that's a really interesting way of thinking about making things or doing things. And likewise at Barbara, that clip that I gave with Barbara, and I said to her, are you ambitious? And she said, no, I don't think I am. She emailed me a couple of days later. She didn't say, oh, actually, yes, I am. But she said exactly, or similarly, she said, it did make me think, and actually made me think, hang on a second, you know, I've been cruising a little bit here. I need to kind of remind myself that I'm going to be doing stuff. And so she found it quite an interesting exchange. Anyway, interesting. If anybody's got any kind of criticisms or any possibilities for improvement or for future episodes or whatever, I think I'm going to leave it for now. I'm not doing any now, but I might do some more in the new year. I mean, I've selected people because I think they either do interesting things or they're interesting people. It's got to be. There is a little bit of the entertainment about it. It has to, I would like to try and find people who I think will have a good conversation. But anyway, I might do some in the new year. But anyway, so if anybody has any thoughts or comments or feedback or whatever, then you're always very welcome to share those with me at some point. There we go. Are we done? You can all go and listen to them now.
Do we have any last questions?
You about to say something? Yes, Stepanka. Yeah.
Well, should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hello. Hi. No, I just wanted to say, thank you for making this podcast, because I find them very interesting, especially because I am fascinated to learn how people work and how they develop their art practice. And I'm quite new to art. And my first podcast that I listened to was with Ellie, and I met Ellie before, so I think that's why I've seen some of her work. That's why I think I picked her part or episode as the first one. But we never really get to talk about how she works. And the way you speak, Robert, I think you are so relaxed and you talk so much. There is never any tension. It's very easygoing and it's entertaining, even though you try not to be entertaining. It is fun to listen. And I really enjoy, because I realize that all these people who are quite, established and doing quite well, they are actually normal, and they sometimes, you think they are like untouchable. They would be hard to reach or to find out what it is, that they do and how they do things. And through your podcast, you learn a lot that they are just struggling, sometimes normally like any other, trying to be artists like me, people. So I really enjoy your podcast. I'm halfway through your new series already. So I'm looking forward to hear some more. Maybe I have one question about your podcast. They all seem to be 38 minutes long. Is there a reason for it? And how do you manage that?
So, well, I kind of think to myself, I read somewhere that maybe you should keep them to under 40 minutes. So that's a good target. and probably that's enough. And also in the aim to keep them entertaining as well as and informative, as it's tempting just to let people run on for as long as they like, but actually you can, it can get a little bit waffly. So it's quite a good discipline to try and boil it down to a certain length of time. So I just try and keep it under 40. I generally end up with about 2 hours worth of material, and some of my editing is not very elegant, but until I get some funding to get somebody who can edit it properly for me, I try and keep it, keep it crisp and moving along. But no, there's no particular reason except that I just think it probably helps to keep it focused.
Okay.
And rather than, but I've got more material and outtakes as well.
So have you had any of the guests complaining that you perhaps cut out too much or something that they really wanted to have?
No, I do have a little bonus actually. Maybe I'll release it at the end.
Okay.
Bonus of Beric. The only one was Beric talking about how he made the podcast jingle itself and did a little demo. But otherwise, no. The feedback has been relatively good, I think. I don't think anybody. I always let people have a listen first. I don't know. Surprise. So, for example, the one with Jane Good. There's a bit in there where we talk about Bob Ross and the joy of sex, and she said, "I'm not sure about this," and I said, "Well, okay, don't worry. If you don't want it, we won't put it in." So we had the conversation, and then she listened back to it. And she was a very good sport about it. He said, "Actually, okay, that's all right. We can keep that in." So it's so far so good.
Okay, thank you.
Genius, because most people's commutes are 40 minutes. So
that is one of the reasons why, because I did a little bit of homework on podcasting, and that was one of the it'll either split into 2 20s for a short bite, or a bit of there and back is 40 minutes or 40 minutes one way. Yeah, that's exactly the reason.
And it's a perfect bathtub amount of time.
All right.
Listening from the top. And I hope you release the jingle thing at Christmas. I feel like that's very perfect.
I think I'll have to do that, yeah. Or maybe we'll have to get Beric to do a special Christmas version.
Charity single.
Yeah. I did start putting together all the outtakes. There are loads of outtakes where, all the ums and ahs and the kind of, the questions that just don't go anywhere and so on. But maybe I'll do
a charity single. Or remember getting to a dance tune or something.
Yeah. Well, I keep saying, you get, when you edit them, you get to know all your verbal tics, and I know I'm so sick of my own voice, and I'm always saying, which is quite interesting, or I kind of, everything ends up interesting, and it just
I think that's part of the joy of the way that you interview people, because you're an explorer, not a teller. And I think that's why when you say people open up to you, it's partly because we genuinely feel like we're following a conversation wherever it will lead, and you're interested in the outcome of that, and so we're interested too. And it's an incredibly skillful and lovely way to do it.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, I never use the word interview, because it's not. I don't feel that I'm coming to kind of interrogate anybody. I always use conversation, because that's the way I think of it, as a kind of a joint, just exploration, really. Anyway, good. Well,
any last questions? If not, we do this every time. If we can just all unmute and give Robert a huge round of applause and say thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much.